So I'm Renaldo Schwarp. From a very practical sense, I'm currently a TV producer and presenter. I'm a radio broadcaster, and I dabble in writing and filmmaking. I think the best way to describe me professionally is probably storyteller, and I've been quite fortunate over the last decade in my career in media to have held a few professional capacities, a lot of them stretching everything from print media, digital media, to linear broadcast television. And I think the golden through line for all of them would be storytelling. Recently, I've definitely pivoted the type of storytelling to very inclusive and representative work. So I've been grateful to do a few projects across that spectrum of disciplines and platforms that's really started and sparked conversations around South Africans, who we are and how we show up. I think that's the cornerstone of media. It's, as you said, fast evolving and ever changing. And I think a skill that any good media practitioner can have in their toolkit is being adaptable and being versatile to those changes. I've been quite lucky to have worked across mediums from the start of my career. And just looking back at the last 10 years, a lot has changed. And if we have this conversation in the next 5 years, what I'll be saying now and the platforms that I'm working on would look totally different. So I think it's important to be adaptable. I think it's important to be versatile. And for me, it's something as basic as staying curious. I am one of those people who, I call myself a digital native. I spend a lot of time on social media. Of course, TikTok is my new favorite, but not so much just from the entertainment level, just to see what type of content there is out there and what conversations are being had. I definitely use social media and digital media as a sourcing ground to ensure that I'm not in an echo chamber when we are creating work. But I think it's staying curious, upskilling yourself into what's happening, what those technologies are. And there's a quote by an author that rings along the lines of, in the 21st century, it's not the people who can't read and write who will stay behind. It's actually those who are not in a position to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think that's a very good foundation for many of us in the media industry to work from. Social media is a very powerful tool to promote inclusivity and to a very basic extent equalize the playing field. I'm very aware of who has the platform to speak and whose voice is the loudest in our traditional media spaces. And while we've seen great strides in the correct direction in that regard, I think social media has shown us that we all firstly have a voice, that we can platform ourselves and amplify that by creating and building a community. So on a very important level, social media is a tool that shouldn't be, and I believe isn't underestimated, to make sure that the voices that need to be heard are heard. We obviously are in South Africa. We live in a very unequal society. The power dynamic is something that we're grappling with. So I think a platform and platforms like social media really help us, and especially those who are marginalized and those who did not have a platform or a voice historically, to have a space, to take up space. And hopefully it equalizes that playing field and balances the power dynamic that we've seen not always bode as well as a fraternity in the media and broadcasting space. I'm quite excited for the Top Empowerment Conference, mainly because it's a conference that creates a space where leaders and decision makers sit in a room and listen to voices around what's really happening and how we all can work together, and we all must work together to effect tangible change. Like I said, we do live in a very unequal South Africa, and conferences like these are quite important because it takes the issues, I believe, to the people who can affect change. And just looking at the previous years and the caliber of speakers on that lineup, it's quite a big honor and a privilege for me to be attending this year, speaking, engaging with all those people, and hopefully we can continue the good work that was done with this conference over the last few years, and pivot forward to creating even bigger, tangible change with regards to empowerment. Over the last few years, I've been quite privileged to have spearheaded a few big digital properties and portfolios for some of the big broadcasters. Of course, working in media, one also has one's own brand and social media platforms that becomes quite important in the work that we do. One thing that I will say, it's digital for me and social media and the space that I work in that regard is a bit of a double-edged sword. If you get it right, amazing things can happen, but if you get it wrong, it can be quite damaging, not just to your brand, but to the individuals on board on that team. And I'm the first to admit that sometimes we got it right and sometimes we missed the mark completely. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that in a South African context, we work with such diverse audiences. So one would argue that you're not always going to cater to everyone. So a very big part for me is, at the core of it, having a very strong and clear idea of what is authentic to you and your brand, and showing up in all those spaces within that parameters. I think trying to be everything to everyone is an absolute no-go and a very slippery slope when you are approaching digital and social media. And we've seen some of the brands get it right, and we've seen some of the big corporates get it wrong. But I think authenticity is at the core of making sure that you build your brand and you not break it. The other thing I think it's important to acknowledge, and I think this is something that really is important for me now in the work that I do in the representatives and inclusion space, is that when we are talking social media, we are talking about communities. So we're dealing with people on the other side. I think it's important to make and use social media as a two-way street, not just communicating to an audience, but bringing that audience into the community because they are the community, and conversing both ways. I think there's so much learning and insights to be found in just social media listening. I think it's important that we as media practitioners, as brands, have our eyes and ears on the ground when it comes to the social media streets. What are people saying? What's the sentiment? And of course that informs how we go to market with a campaign, with a strategy, with a content piece. And I think it would be very dangerous if you don't do that, because I think many of us are quite afraid of getting dragged on Twitter or cancelled. But I think it's good that we have an audience and a community that holds us as individuals, as people in the media, and as big corporates accountable. And I think it just shows the responsibility that we have as those decision makers when we are going to market with digital and social media campaigns to get it right, because we are dealing with people and real issues. And social media should be seen as a very important pillar of your business and your brand. I'm Renaldo Schwarp, and I'm so excited for this year's Top Empowerment Conference taking place on the 19th to the 20th of July. A fantastic lineup of speakers, a great networking opportunity, and it's really going to change the way we as South Africans do business and how we talk about and approach inclusivity, and redistributing that conversation further and taking it forward. I can't wait to see you there.